The last light of the week stretched thin across Harper Ranch, painting the fence posts in tired gold. Liam Harper wiped the dust from his jaw with the back of his hand, feeling every bit of the exhaustion that came from 6 straight days of branding calves, hauling feed, and fixing fences that the desert wind liked to tear down just for spite. He had planned on nothing more demanding than sitting on his porch with a plate of leftover stew and a cold beer. Maybe listening to the cicadas hum their rough evening song. Maybe letting his bones rest for once. But the sound of hooves approached, steady, certain, and he knew without looking that peace would have to wait. Sophia rode up on her buckskin mare, ponytail whipping behind her. She reined in close to the porch, cheeks flushed with the kind of news she didn't know how to deliver gently. "Before you get too settled," she said breathless, "you should know someone moved on to the old Garrison place." Liam paused mid-step. Someone? Or something? Because that land hasn't seen a soul in 4 years. Someone, Sophia confirmed. A woman, Apache. Traveling light and alone from what I saw. She bought the deed outright. That last part did surprise him. Folks didn't usually buy the Garrison land. They walked away from it. Too dry, too lonely, too close to the Coyotes trail. "Thought you might ride over," Sophia added. "Check if she needs a hand." Liam grunted. "She's probably fine." But even as he said it, something in his chest tugged. Maybe duty, maybe curiosity, maybe something nameless. Sophia smirked because she already knew how this would end. "Just go, Liam. Don't make it look like kindness is a burden." He shot her a look, but she was already turning her mare, dust swirling in her wake. The walk to the neighboring property wasn't long, just a narrow dirt trail that dipped across a bone-dry creek bed. The air smelled of warm sage and the faint sweetness of juniper. The sun was sinking slowly, steadily, like a lantern running out of oil. When the Garrison cabin came into view, Liam slowed. It was still the same lonesome structure, weather-beaten boards, crooked roofline, but now there was smoke curling from the chimney. Someone had swept the porch clean. A few bundles of belongings rested by the door. And there she was. A woman sat on the top step, elbows resting loosely on her knees, as though the weight of the day had finally settled on her shoulders. Her long black hair spilled like a river down her back, catching the sunset in deep copper streaks. She wasn't crying, wasn't trembling, just sitting very still, as if trying to remember how to breathe in a place that didn't yet feel like hers. Olivia. He didn't know her name yet, but even from a distance he felt the quiet gravity around her. She lifted her head when his boots crunched on the path. Her eyes, dark, steady, alert, met his with a guarded calm. Liam touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am, name's Liam Harper. I ranch the land to the east." A long second passed. Then she nodded once, a gesture that felt neither warm nor cold, simply cautious, carved from experience. "I saw you just moved in," he continued awkwardly. "Figured I'd stop by, see if you needed help with anything." "I'm managing," she replied softly. Her voice was low, almost melodic, but carried the weariness of someone who had crossed more than miles to reach this place. He shifted his weight, feeling strangely clumsy. He was good with horses, good with cattle, good with tools, but women sitting alone at sunset with unreadable eyes, that was another story. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "if anything gives you trouble, the roof leaks, the well sputters out, coyotes get too bold, you can send word. I'm close enough." Another pause, then, unexpectedly, a faint curve touched her lips. Not quite a smile, more like an acknowledgement. "Thank you," she said. "It's new here." "Yeah," Liam murmured, glancing at the barren yard, the tough soil, the fading sky. "Takes getting used to." He started to turn away, but something made him look back. Maybe it was the way she sat, straight spine, squared shoulders, like someone who refused to be broken, even if she was still gathering the pieces. Sophia's words drifted back to him. A woman, Apache, traveling light and alone, but Olivia didn't look lost. She looked like someone who had survived too much and wasn't sure what came next. And though Liam didn't know it yet, that moment, the dusty path, the bruised sky, the quiet woman on the porch, would shift the course of both their lives as gently and irrevocably as the sun setting over the desert. The next morning rose pale and wind stirred across the valley, carrying that dry whisper the desert liked to send ahead of a long afternoon. Liam Harper saddled his horse with the simple intention of checking fence lines, but his hands took the trail toward the old Garrison place without asking him first. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe manners. Or maybe it was the picture of Olivia sitting alone in the dusk, steady on the outside, frayed beneath, that hadn't left his mind. When he reached her porch, the door was cracked open, swaying gently with each breath of wind. He knocked anyway. "It's open," came her voice. Quiet, controlled, carrying a hint of fatigue. Liam stepped inside. The cabin smelled of cedar dust and old memories. The floorboards creaked like they were stretching their stiff joints after years of silence. Light pushed through the thin curtains, settling over stacked crates and a broom that had given up halfway across the room. Olivia stood near the hearth, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal arms marked by sun and hard travel. She looked like she belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. "Morning," Liam said. "Figured I'd help get this place standing proper." She didn't refuse, but she didn't welcome him either. She simply nodded, stepping aside so he could move through the narrow space. The first thing he noticed were the crates. Sturdy wooden boxes marked with Apache symbols burned softly into their sides. Spirals, arrows, crescents. They weren't decorative. They were memory keepers, story holders. Things people carried when they left behind a life they didn't want to lose entirely. He paused, tracing the edge of one symbol with a calloused finger. "That means home," Olivia said quietly from behind him, or something like it. He turned, surprised she had chosen to explain. She shrugged, eyes dropping. "Some things follow you, even when you walk away." The room felt different after that. Not just dusty, not just crowded, but layered with stories she wasn't ready to tell. Stories she was still deciding whether they should remain hers alone. Liam lifted one of the crates to move it toward the wall. It was heavier than he expected, weighted not just by the items inside, but by the unspoken things surrounding them. "You don't have to unpack while I'm here," he said gently. Olivia's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I'm not unpacking, just organizing the shadows." It was the kind of sentence that told him she'd been carrying too much for too long. They worked in a rhythm after that. He cleared cobwebs from the corners, hammered loose boards back into place, adjusted the door hinges that squealed like dying coyotes. Olivia swept the floor, rolled blankets, and sorted jars of herbs she'd brought from her homeland. Neither talked much, but the silence wasn't awkward. It settled warm, like two people used to loneliness suddenly finding it easier in each other's company. At one point, a gust of wind pushed through the gaps in the wall, rattling the window pane and letting a low, hollow whistle echo around the room. It made the little cabin feel like it was exhaling old ghosts. Olivia shivered, not from cold, but from memory. "You sure you're all right living alone out here?" Liam asked softly. Her eyes lifted to meet his. They were dark, shimmering with exhaustion and gratitude tangled together. "I've been alone before," she said. "This time, at least I chose it." He didn't push further. He didn't ask about the life she'd left, or the people who might have hurt her, or the road that had carved that quiet resilience into her bones. But he saw it all the same. He saw the way she straightened her shoulders when the wind howled. He saw the way she kept her distance, as though she'd learned not to rely on kindness. He saw the weight she hid beneath calm words and steady hands. And something inside him tightened, not in pity, but in recognition. Pain knew pain, loneliness knew loneliness. Yet something else filled the room too. Something gentler, flickering just beneath the surface. When they finished, the cabin still looked worn, still breathed with old wood and old stories, but it felt less abandoned, less haunted. Olivia leaned against the doorframe, catching her breath. "Thank you," she said simply. Liam nodded, dusting off his hands. "Anytime." Their eyes held for a moment longer than either meant them to. Long enough for Liam to feel a question forming between them. Long enough for Olivia to silently refuse to answer it. But the silence, again, felt strangely comfortable, as if the two of them had already shared something without speaking a single word. He stepped out into the sunlight, left her to her shadows, and told himself he wouldn't come back unless asked. But even as he walked away, he knew that wouldn't be true. By late afternoon, the cabin no longer looked like a place abandoned by time. Dust still lined the window frames, and the roof still sagged in an ornery way that promised future repairs. But something had shifted. The house breathed again. Liam brushed his hands on his jeans and caught Olivia watching him with that quiet expression she carried like armor. Not suspicious, not cold, just careful. "You should get some real food after all this," he said, nodding toward the road. "Come over to my place. Supper's simple but warm." Olivia hesitated. The kind of hesitation born from years of eating alone, of measuring every invitation to see what strings might be tied to it. But the desert wind was cooling, and she looked tired in a way he couldn't ignore. Finally, she gave a small nod. All right. They walked the short trail to Harper Ranch, dust swirling around their boots. The sun was sinking low, the sky burning in streaks of copper and rose. Olivia kept glancing toward the horizon, as if reading omens in the colors. But Liam recognized that look. It was the look of someone trying to remember what it felt like to let her guard down. His porch was wide, steady, and weathered by a lifetime of storms. Liam lit the lantern hung beside the door, its glow spreading a gentle amber across the railing. From the kitchen, he carried out a plate of smoked beef, a tin of cornbread, and 2 tin cups filled with cool water from the well. Not fancy, he said as he handed her a plate. Fancy is overrated, she replied softly, sitting on the top step. The smell of the smoked meat drifted through the warm evening air. Olivia took a bite, her eyes widening a little. This is good, Liam chuckled. Well, you're the first one to tell me that without being family or feeling sorry for me. That earned him something he hadn't expected. A laugh. A real one. Light, brief, but genuine enough to stun him for a second. The sound rolled through him like a warm tide. He hadn't known how much he needed to hear that until it happened. You ought to laugh more, he said before he could stop himself. Olivia dropped her gaze, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Haven't had much reason to. He didn't press. There was a softness under her words he recognized from earlier. The softness of a wound not yet healed. Beyond the railing, the Harper horses ran across the pasture, manes rippling like dark ribbons against the falling sun. Olivia leaned forward, her eyes following their movement with an almost wistful fascination. They're beautiful, she murmured. They're trouble, Liam corrected, but his smile betrayed him. A breeze swept across the porch, carrying the scent of sagebrush and warm dirt. For a while they ate in silence, the easy kind again, the kind that didn't demand explanations or filling. Where'd you come from? Liam asked finally, voice low and respectful. Olivia took her time before answering. South Ridge. My people kept to the higher canyons. It was home for a long time. And now? She tapped her thumb quietly on her cup. Now I'm trying to figure out if a person can start over without bringing all their ghosts with them. Liam nodded. He didn't know her ghosts, but he sure knew the feeling. You seem strong enough to manage it, he said. She looked at him then. Really looked. And for a heartbeat, he wondered what she saw. A rancher who'd been alone too long? A man who hid loneliness behind hard work? Or maybe just someone who showed up when she didn't expect anyone to. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. That porch felt like the safest place I've seen in years. Liam swallowed, caught off guard by the honesty threaded through her words. You're welcome here anytime, he said quietly. The lantern flickered as the sun dipped below the ridge, leaving streaks of lavender and blue across the sky. Olivia finished her meal and set the tin plate aside, her shoulders no longer pulled tight. Something in her posture had softened, like she'd let herself breathe for the first time in far too long. Liam didn't try to stretch the moment or read more into it than he should. He simply sat beside her, both of them facing the wide, open land that stretched further than grief or fear or memory. Neither spoke again that night. They didn't need to. Sometimes the quiet between two people says more than words ever could. The morning after their quiet supper drifted in slow and warm, the kind of morning where the sun didn't rush and neither did the wind. Liam Harper saddled his horse with no real reason to leave the ranch, at least none he'd admit out loud. He told himself he needed to check the wash near the canyon. He told himself the fence might have loosened after last night's breeze. He told himself a dozen excuses, but along with those excuses, he slipped his toolbox into the saddlebag, just in case. The trail toward Olivia's cabin felt shorter than the day before, maybe because he knew what waited at the end of it. A porch that held shadows, a woman who held even more. When he approached, he saw her immediately. Sitting on the top step of the porch, knees drawn slightly inward, elbows resting on them. She held something small in her hands, turning it slowly between her fingers. A broken necklace, thin cord, a single carved bead, fragile as a memory. Olivia didn't look up right away. The morning light fell over her hair, making it gleam in shades of onyx and ember. She was still, almost too still, as if she were trying not to feel whatever the object pulled out of her. Liam stepped lightly onto the porch. Morning. She startled. Not visibly, but in the slight way her shoulders twitched. Then she tucked the necklace into her palm as if hiding something private. "You're up early," she said, voice soft, eyes trying to read him. "Fence needed checking." He shrugged, the lie gentle, harmless. "Thought I'd swing by since I was close." Her gaze drifted past him to the wide stretch of empty land. There was no fence nearby, no wash, nothing but open range, and the truth she didn't call out. Still, she didn't challenge him. Maybe because she didn't mind the lie. Maybe because she understood it. Liam eased himself down on the step beside her. Not too close, not assuming, but near enough that their shoulders shared the same morning breeze. He set the toolbox quietly at his feet. He didn't reach for her necklace. He didn't ask why it was broken. He didn't pry. Olivia watched him from the corner of her eye, waiting for questions that never came. After a long silence, she exhaled slowly. "This necklace. Someone gave it to me a long time ago." He nodded, letting her talk if she wanted to, and letting her keep silent if she didn't. "It snapped a few days before I left," she murmured. "I haven't decided whether it's worth fixing." Liam kept his eyes on the horizon. "Some things break because they're worn out. Others break because they've been carried too long." He said it plainly, without ceremony, without trying to dig deeper. Olivia looked down at her hands, thumb brushing over the single bead. She didn't respond, but something in her posture shifted, barely yet unmistakably. A quiet loosening, a thread of guardedness easing one knot. The wind swept across the porch, lifting a strand of her hair. She tucked it behind her ear, her movements delicate but steady, the movements of someone used to tending their own wounds. "You don't have to sit here," she said after a moment, her voice almost apologetic. "I'm not very good at conversation." "Good thing I didn't come for conversation," Liam replied. "Came for the quiet." That earned the faintest flicker of a smile. Not wide, not bright, but real. They sat like that for several minutes, both staring at the open land before them. A hawk circled overhead. Far off, a cow lowed lazily. The desert morning unfolded with slow confidence, as if it knew there was no need to rush healing. At one point, Olivia's hand relaxed. Not much, but enough for the bead to roll gently in her palm instead of being clasped protectively. Liam didn't comment on it, he just stayed. And for the first time since arriving, Olivia didn't instinctively brace herself around him. She didn't shrink. She didn't stiffen. She didn't calculate distance. She just breathed. Something warm flickered between them. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Just a small, steady spark. The kind of spark that didn't flare, but endured, nestling into the quiet like it had been waiting for them both. Olivia let her shoulders settle, her voice barely above the whisper of wind. "You have a way of making the silence seem less heavy." Liam shrugged, eyes forward. "Silence doesn't bother me. Most folks talk too much anyway." She laughed, a small, startled sound, and he felt it ripple through the porch boards. It wasn't the laughter from last night. This one was softer, more trusting, more vulnerable. And in that moment, something shifted. Subtle, but irreversible. The kind of moment where a woman begins to believe she might not have to face the world alone. The kind of moment where a man realizes he'd cross a long stretch of empty land just to sit beside someone in the quiet. A moment where a flame didn't blaze, but caught quietly, firmly, and with promise. The first ember of trust. The storm rolled in without warning, a wild thing sweeping across the borderlands with the temper of a restless spirit. One moment the sky was a dusty blue, the next it tightened into a bruised gray that pressed low over the ridge. Thunder cracked like rifle fire, sharp and close. Horses in the Harper pasture scattered, hooves pounding as the wind whipped dust into spiraling ghosts. Inside his barn, Liam looked up sharply at the sudden roar of rain. The first sheets hit the roof hard enough to rattle it. A storm like this wasn't common this late in the season, and it wasn't forgiving either. Then he saw it. Across the stretch of land, through slanted walls of rain, a single glow flickered on Olivia's porch. Her lantern, the one she hadn't lit once since moving in. A lantern on the porch meant one thing on ranch land. "I need someone here, not tomorrow, now." Liam grabbed his hat, a worn leather one with a brim bent from years of weather, and bolted out into the storm. The rain hammered his shoulders, cold and merciless, soaking through his shirt as he jogged toward the creek bed. The dry wash had turned into a shallow torrent, water rushing fast over mud and stone. He crossed anyway. Lightning clawed at the sky as he climbed the rise toward Olivia's cabin. Rain sluiced down the wooden siding, dripping in steady threads from the eaves. The porch lantern swayed, pushed by the wind like it might tumble at any moment. And there she was, Olivia, standing in the doorway, small but unbroken, shoulders tight, hands pressed against the frame, as if steadying herself against memories only she could see. Liam reached the steps, breath heavy, boots soaked. "You all right?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head once. That was enough. He stepped inside without another word, shutting the door against the storm's relentless howl. Water dripped from his coat onto the floorboards. The cabin was dim, lit only by the small fire dying in the hearth. The roof above one corner leaked steadily into a bucket she'd placed beneath. Her hands trembled as she tried to relight the fire properly, but the match shook too badly. Liam knelt beside her and took the matches gently from her fingers, not abruptly, but with a steady patience she didn't pull away from. "I've got it," he murmured. The fire took after a few careful strikes, flames curling up like warm breath. Liam added wood, coaxing the blaze until the room glowed with amber light. Outside, the storm battered the cabin, wind keening through the tiniest cracks. Olivia sank onto the rug beside the hearth, arms wrapped around herself. Not from cold, Liam knew cold. This was something else, something deeper, something that pulled her inward like a memory with sharp teeth. He sat beside her, but not touching, not crowding, just close enough that she wouldn't feel alone. After a long moment, her voice broke the quiet. "Storms like this," she swallowed. "They remind me of nights I'd rather forget." He didn't ask. He didn't need the details to understand the weight she carried. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the strain in her jaw, the way she blinked too slowly, as if keeping old fear at bay. Then, with a voice as soft as the rain against the windows, she asked, "Are you here out of kindness, or because of me?" The storm paused, or maybe it only felt that way. Liam turned his head toward her. The question wasn't about tonight. Not really. It was about every quiet moment before this one, about why he kept coming back, about what he wasn't saying. He didn't answer with words. Words could be misunderstood, distrusted, twisted by doubt. So instead, he let her see the truth directly. Offered through the steadiness in his eyes, the calm in his breath, the way he didn't look away even when the storm cracked open the sky behind them. He was here because she mattered, because something had begun between them, small, steady, impossible to ignore, because he'd cross 10 storms if it meant she wouldn't face one alone. Olivia's breath hitched, barely audible. The tremble in her hands eased, not gone, but gentled. Outside, rain hammered the roof. Inside, the fire warmed the room, and something warmer still flickered between them. Quiet, certain, unhurried. This was the moment the distance changed, the moment two solitary lives stopped standing so far apart. The moment trust, real trust, took its first anchor in both their hearts. The storm left the land scrubbed clean. By morning, the sky stretched wide and startlingly blue, as if the night before had never shaken it apart. The soil smelled rich, damp, alive. Birds returned to the ridge, shaking droplets from their feathers as they hopped along the fence rails. Liam walked to Olivia's cabin with 2 tin mugs in hand, steam rising into the cool air. He found her outside, sitting on the porch steps wrapped in a blanket, watching the fresh sunlight spill across her small yard. She looked different in the morning glow. Less guarded, though still carrying that deep, quiet fatigue that never fully left her eyes. When she saw him holding the coffee, she exhaled a soft laugh, barely there, but warm enough to reach him. "You bring offerings now?" she teased gently. "Bringing breakfast," he corrected. Offerings would be sweeter. It was simple, easy, familiar. The kind of conversation two people had when the shift between strangers and something else had already begun. He sat beside her, handing her a mug. Their shoulders brushed lightly, but Olivia didn't flinch. She just cupped the warm tin in both hands and took a careful sip. For a few minutes, they watched the sun creep slowly across the red dirt, turning it from rust to fire. The peaceful silence was different from the ones before, less cautious, more companionable. Eventually, Olivia set her mug down, fingers tracing the rim as if searching for courage. "There's something I should tell you," she murmured. Liam didn't interrupt. He angled his body toward her, patient as the land itself. "I left my tribe," she began, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not because I wanted to, but because staying would have broken me worse." Her voice was steady, but the edges trembled. Liam waited. "I was married," she continued. A long time ago, but it feels like yesterday sometimes. It wasn't violent, just suffocating. Expectations piled on me until I couldn't breathe. I wasn't myself anymore. She paused, swallowing hard before the words spilled softer. I walked away before I disappeared completely. Liam felt something twist in his chest. Not pity, but a fierce respect. He understood what it cost a person to leave a life, to step into loneliness just to reclaim their own name. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry, didn't try to patch the wound she carried. He simply nodded and said, "Everyone deserves a place they can breathe." The relief that crossed her face was quiet but enormous. "No one ever said that to me," Olivia whispered, not without judgment attached. "Well," Liam replied, "I'm not real interested in judging folks. I'm too busy fixing fences." Her laugh, light, clear, was the brightest sound he'd heard in weeks. From that day on, small habits rooted themselves naturally into their lives, like seedlings carried by the wind. Each morning, after the sun lifted over the ridge, they met at the fence line with coffee. Olivia would lean on the weathered post, hair loose and shining in the new light, while Liam talked about cattle prices or the stubborn mare that refused her own name. Olivia listened with a soft smile, as though these ordinary things mattered more than he realized. Later in the afternoons, Liam climbed onto Olivia's roof with a hammer tucked into his belt, patching old planks the storm had bullied loose. She would stand below, handing him nails or steadying the ladder. "You're going to fix this whole house," she said one day. "Just keeping it standing," he answered. "Some of us need solid roofs more than others." She didn't argue. In return, Olivia began teaching him pieces of her own world. Apache remedies, herbs that soothed fever or eased a restless mind, ways to read the wind by scent alone. One evening, she placed a small bundle of sage in his palm. "For protection," she said. Liam held it carefully, touched by the gesture. "You really think I need protecting?" Olivia met his gaze for a long moment. Not from outside things. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't have to. Weeks passed quietly, but something unmistakable grew between them, unhurried and steady as the dawns they shared. They didn't try to name it. They just lived it. A cup of coffee placed in waiting hands. A roof repaired without being asked. A lesson in herbs shared beneath fading sunset. Two lives weaving themselves together without permission or apology. Olivia began to smile more freely. Liam found reasons to walk the trail between their homes, even on days when nothing needed fixing. Their conversations stretched longer, their silences became softer, and the space between them felt less like a boundary and more like a promise. Warm light had begun to settle on this new ground they both stood on, tentative, hopeful, real, and neither of them could deny that something inside them was finally quietly coming back to life. The heat settled early that morning, warm enough that the air shimmered above the red dirt. Liam had stopped by Olivia's place after finishing his chores, offering to help her mend the fence where last month's storm had weakened it. They worked in comfortable rhythm, passing tools, tightening wire, brushing dust from their hands. When they were nearly done, Olivia stepped inside to fetch more nails. The door creaked open wider than she meant it to, and a draft pushed through the cabin, lifting the edge of a folded blanket on her table. Only it wasn't a blanket. It was a tattered piece of Apache woven cloth, threads frayed and broken along the edges. The colors, once deep earth red and sky blue, had faded into muted shadows of themselves. Liam wasn't trying to pry, but the cloth caught his eye, not because it was old, but because it looked hurt, like something that had been pulled apart, not worn apart. Olivia froze when she returned to the doorway and saw where his gaze had landed. Her breath hitched, the smallest sound but sharp as flint. "I didn't mean to," Liam began. "It's all right," she whispered, though her hands trembled as she folded the cloth quickly, as if protecting a wound from open air. "You were bound to see it someday." He didn't move, didn't speak. He waited steady, letting her choose the next step. For a long moment, Olivia kept her back to him, fingers pressed against the torn fabric. When she finally turned, her eyes were shadowed but resolved. "In my tribe," she said quietly, "women weave these patterns to mark important moments. Births, unions, new beginnings." Liam nodded, giving her space. "This one?" She hesitated. "It was woven the day I married." The words hung heavy between them, like dust that refused to settle. She laid the cloth on the table again, smoothing it with tender, almost sorrowful hands. "He told me I wasn't enough," she murmured. "Said I talked too much, thought too much, wandered too far. Said a wife should be quiet, patient, devoted. Someone people barely noticed. She gave a brittle laugh, one with no humor, only memory. I guess I wasn't very good at disappearing. Liam felt something hot rise beneath his ribs. Not anger aimed at her past, but frustration at the way someone had tried to make her smaller than she was. He swallowed it down. This moment wasn't about his reaction. It was about her truth finally finding air. He wanted me to shrink, she said softly, to be a shadow, to fit inside the shape he made for me. When I didn't, he stopped seeing me at all, just saw the ways I failed him. Her shoulders tightened, and for a long time, I believed him. The silence that followed was thick, aching, almost unbearable. Liam stepped closer, not abruptly, just enough that she felt his presence before she heard his voice. "Olivia," he said gently, "look at me." She did, slowly, reluctantly. Her eyes searched his, bracing for judgment or pity. Liam offered neither. "You're not small," he said, voice rough with sincerity. "You never were." Olivia blinked hard, lips parting in a small, stunned breath. No one had ever said those words to her. Not without strings, not without warning, not without expecting her to fold herself into their version of her. Liam continued, softer now. "If a man ever tried to make you feel less, that shame belongs to him, not you." Her throat worked as she tried to swallow the emotion rising too quickly. "You don't know everything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe I could have tried harder. Maybe I—" "No," Liam cut in quietly. "Don't do that. Don't rewrite yourself smaller to make his mistakes easier to carry." Olivia's eyes shimmered, not with tears exactly, but with something deeper, a kind of relief that felt foreign on her tongue. Outside, a gust of warm wind swept across the land, rattling the loose boards of the cabin. Inside, something steadier settled in its place. "This cloth," she whispered, touching the torn edge. "I keep it so I don't forget where I came from. But sometimes I wonder if it holds me too tightly." "Then let it be a reminder," Liam said, "not a chain." Her breath wavered, and she sank slowly into the chair by the table. Liam pulled out the other chair and sat across from her, their knees nearly touching. They didn't speak for a long while. They didn't need to. Because what Olivia had shared wasn't just history, it was a doorway. And the way Liam listened wasn't just kindness, it was belonging. That afternoon, on a quiet patch of land no map had bothered naming, Olivia finally let someone else carry a piece of her truth. And Liam, in his steady, unassuming way, promised he wasn't going anywhere. Spring arrived quietly that year, like it was testing the land before settling in. The evenings softened first. The wind, once sharp and restless, grew warmer, brushing over the hills like a gentle hand smoothing wrinkled cloth. Wildflowers began to push through the cracks in the red earth, stubborn, bright, unashamed of blooming after so many hard months. Liam noticed them while mending the fence near Olivia's place. A cluster of pale yellow blossoms, delicate enough to look breakable, but bold enough to thrive in dust. He picked a handful before he could second-guess himself, tucking them carefully into his vest pocket so the petals wouldn't tear. By the time he reached Olivia's cabin, the sky had turned a soft pink, the kind of color that made the world feel tender for no good reason. Smoke drifted lazily from her fire pit. She was crouched beside it, feeding small sticks into the growing flame. When she looked up and saw him, her lips curved, not fully into a smile, but into something warmer than the guarded expression she once wore. "You're early," she said softly. "Found something on the trail," Liam replied, suddenly unsure if a man his age had any business bringing flowers like a lovesick kid. But he pulled them out anyway. "Figured they belonged here more than in the dirt." Olivia froze for one breath, then another. The fire snapped behind her, sending sparks into the evening air while she stared at the blossoms in his hand. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They reminded me of you," he said before he could swallow the honesty. Her cheeks warmed with color, not embarrassment, but something gentler, something blooming. She took the flowers slowly, like accepting something fragile. "Thank you." Liam lowered himself onto the log beside her, close enough to feel the heat from the fire and the faint presence of her shoulder near his. They watched the flames for a while. Sparks rose like scattered stars, and the scent of burning cedar drifted around them. The night settled with the unhurried confidence of springtime. Eventually, Olivia spoke, her voice carrying the ache of truth in every syllable. "Liam, do you ever think about the things you're afraid to lose?" He turned slightly toward her. "More than I care to admit." She nodded, staring into the fire as though searching for answers in its shifting colors. I lost myself once, she said quietly. Or I let someone take pieces until I didn't recognize what was left. Coming here was the first choice I made purely for myself. That took courage, Liam said. No, she corrected, breath unsteady. Running took fear. Staying, letting people in, that takes courage. He didn't rush her, didn't try to rescue her from her own words. He simply waited, his presence steady as the earth beneath them. Then, softer than the rustle of grass, she confessed, "This feels real, and that scares me." Liam's heart tightened in a way he hadn't expected. Not painful, just full. Full of understanding, full of want, full of something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. He reached out, slow enough that she could pull away if she needed to. His fingers brushed her hand, warm, calloused, grounding. "Then let it scare both of us," he murmured. Olivia's breath caught, her lashes lowered, shadows flickering across her cheeks. When she lifted her gaze again, there was no confusion in it, no doubt, just a quiet decision forming like a sunrise. She leaned closer first, barely, like a question he already knew the answer to. Liam closed the remaining distance. Their first kiss wasn't hurried. It wasn't the desperate kind born from loneliness or fear. It was steady, certain, like two people finding each other in the exact moment they were meant to. Her lips were soft against his, familiar in a way that startled them both, and the warmth from the fire wrapped around them as though sealing the moment. When they parted, Olivia rested her forehead lightly against his, eyes closed, breath mingling with his. "I didn't think I'd ever find something that felt like this again," she whispered. "You didn't find it alone," he replied. The fire crackled, throwing gentle light over their joined hands. The spring breeze shifted through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers, cedar smoke, and something newly born between them. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real, undeniably, unmistakably real. Two hearts choosing each other without needing to say the words aloud. Spring settled fully over the borderlands, smoothing out the last rough edges winter had left behind. Days warmed, nights softened, and the earth, tough, stubborn earth, finally gave permission for new things to grow. Olivia was the first to answer that permission. She began clearing a patch of ground beside her cabin, kneeling in the dirt with the patient determination of someone who had built and rebuilt her life more than once. Liam found her there early one morning, hair tied loosely, hands already stained with soil. "Starting a garden?" he asked, leaning against the fence post. She brushed a streak of dirt from her cheek. "Herbs first. My mother taught me to grow what heals before what tastes good." Liam smiled. "Reckon healing's a good place to start." So she planted sage, mint, yarrow. She built small rows bordered by stones she gathered from the creek bed. And as the days lengthened, tiny green sprouts pushed out of the ground, reaching for the sun the way Olivia had begun reaching for her own light again. While she worked the soil, Liam worked the land between their homes. One afternoon, he arrived with a post-hole digger slung over his shoulder. "What are you up to now?" she asked, shading her eyes. "Figured the old boundary fence needed fixing," he said casually, though the fence hadn't needed fixing in years. He dug fresh holes, set sturdy posts, and stretched new wire along the line that divided their properties. Only this time, he angled the fencing in a way that opened the land instead of splitting it. Two pieces of land growing closer, just like the people living on them. Olivia watched him from her porch, chin resting on her knees. She didn't say anything, but the softness in her eyes told him she understood what he was really building. Her laughter started to return next. At first it was small, barely there smiles when he surprised her with fresh apples from town, brief chuckles when the goats from his ranch escaped and wandered onto her property. Then full, warm laughter arrived, the kind that made her eyes brighten and her shoulders lift with a freedom she hadn't felt in years. Liam lived for those sounds. He began lingering near her porch in the evenings, pretending to check the sky for rain or make sure her chimney wasn't clogged. In truth, he was waiting for the glow of her lantern, the soft amber light that meant she was home, safe, and maybe hoping he'd stop by. Olivia, for her part, started humming while cooking, soft melodies from her childhood, drifting through her open windows. Sometimes Liam heard her singing from halfway across his property, her voice weaving through the twilight like something half wild and half tender. The land had changed, she had changed, he had changed. And 2 months slipped by so naturally that it felt impossible they had ever lived apart. One peaceful morning, the kind that felt washed clean by the night, Liam found Olivia kneeling in her new garden, checking the growth of her sage plants. Sunlight dusted her hair in gold, and a warm breeze tugged at the loose strands around her face. He crouched beside her, brushing his fingers through the mint leaves. "Garden's coming along. So is everything else," she murmured. It was then she looked up at him, eyes glowing with something soft and steady. "I didn't come here to fall in love," she said, voice quiet but sure. "But somehow it found me anyway." The world held still for a moment, birds pausing on the fence rails, wind slowing just enough to listen. Liam didn't rush to answer. He let her words sink into the morning air, let their truth settle deep into the soil around them. "I'm glad it did," he said finally, his voice low, honest, "because I sure as hell wasn't expecting it either." Olivia's smile grew, open, unguarded, one of the rare ones that reached all the way to her eyes. And then without ceremony, she leaned her head against his shoulder, dirt on her hands, warmth in her breath, trust in the way she let herself rest beside him. Liam wrapped an arm around her gently, careful not to crush the young plants growing between them. The garden wasn't the only thing taking root. Something steady and hopeful was growing right there in the quiet morning. Something stronger than fear, softer than memory. A new season had begun. Spring in Dry Creek always arrived with dust, sunlight, and the kind of excitement that only a small western town could muster. Once a year, folks from every direction gathered for the spring trading fair, barter tents flapping, children chasing each other through the main road, ranchers bragging about their horses, and musicians playing fiddle tunes that echoed off every storefront. This year felt different, because this year, Olivia walked into town not as a stranger, not as a shadow, but by Liam Harper's side, a place she never expected to stand. She wore a simple woven shawl, one she'd repaired herself, threads of new colors running through the old weave, like fresh hope stitched into memory. People glanced at her with curiosity, but not coldness. The presence of Liam, a steady wall of calm, kindness, and quiet strength, gave her a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Still, she kept close to him. It was her first time standing in the middle of a crowd since leaving her old life behind. Liam sensed it. He didn't hover, didn't smother, just stayed near enough that she felt anchored. At the horse corral, he stepped forward to talk saddles with a neighbor, leaving Olivia to wander among the booths. A woman selling quilts paused her stitching long enough to smile. "First fair in these parts?" she asked. Olivia nodded. Before she could step away, another man, friendly, older, well-meaning, gestured to the open land stretching far beyond the town's borders. Why move to a place this empty?" The question wasn't rude, just honest in the way Westerners were accustomed to being. But it carried weight, weight from her past, weight from everything she'd fought to leave. Olivia inhaled. For a moment, the noise of the fair faded, the fiddles, the laughter, the bartering voices. Her eyes drifted instinctively toward the horse stalls across the road. There Liam stood, one hand resting on a bay mare's neck, sunlight catching the edge of his hat brim. When he felt her gaze, he looked up and, without fanfare, smiled at her. Not the smile he gave the whole town. A different one. A softer one meant only for her. And suddenly the question wasn't hard at all. Olivia turned back to the man, her voice steady. "I came here to start over," she said. "But I stayed because someone finally made this place feel like home." The man nodded, satisfied. But Olivia wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes stayed on Liam as he crossed the road to reach her, his stride slow, brows raised slightly as if to ask, "You doing all right?" She was. For the first time in years, she truly was. They left the fair as the sun dipped low, horses snorting softly behind them, and the sky glowing a warm copper. The road back to their land stretched long and quiet, dust rising behind their boots. Halfway home, Liam reached for her hand. Not abruptly, but with a trembling gentleness she felt all the way to her ribs. Olivia squeezed his fingers. He exhaled. Then, voice low and rough, he said, "Then stay for good." She stopped walking, turned to him, saw every unsaid word in his eyes, every silent morning shared by the fence, every evening lantern waiting on her porch, every quiet promise he'd carried without speaking. "I wasn't looking for a future when I came here," she whispered, "but somehow I found one anyway." Liam stepped closer. "With me?" "With you," she said simply. They reached the old split-rail fence that marked the border between their properties. The fence Liam had rebuilt, strengthened, angled toward her land without ever admitting why. The valley stretched before them in wide, golden silence. The last sunlight poured down between the hills, washing everything in a warm, forgiving glow. Olivia leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. His arm slipped around her waist, sure and steady. Two solitary souls, once wounded by different storms, now stood together, no longer drifting, no longer hiding. Not an ending, a beginning, a promise whispered into desert wind. And as the sun set over Dry Creek, Liam and Olivia watched it side by side. Two hearts that had finally, undeniably, found home in each other.